So, Divinicus,
Yes.
tell us about the difference between alchemy and magic. We talked about this.
Okay, well, alchemy is a type of magic. But magic comes in different categories. There's earth magic and there's celestial magic. Now, the earth magic oftentimes has to do with fallen angels and summoning entities and different beings. And celestial magic has to do with angels and restoring your divinity and being more like God. Now, the thing is this. Alchemy is different in the sense that it tends to be more solitary. The archetype of the alchemist is the hermit. So it's a path of generally solitary discovery, except the training that you may have from another alchemist. Whereas earth magic is usually Wiccan or having to do with something similar to that, shamanistic, where it's often done in groups, not necessarily, but it can be. And it's of the earth, Mother Nature, whereas alchemy is Father Sky. That's pretty much the basic difference. One is more masculine, one is more feminine in nature. That's pretty much the size of it.
Great. Okay. So can you tell us a little history of the alchemy?
History of alchemy. Alchemy has its foundation in all of alchemy on one slab of stone that was found in one of the pyramids in ancient Egypt. This stone was called the Emerald Tablet. Now, there were several others, but there's one that's publicly been seen, and the rest are hidden or occult or whatever, but not for public view, by whoever made that decision. But the reason this stone is so unique is because this stone is a green stone that has been treated somehow by someone to where, even though it's 10,400 years old, it is completely immune to any form of decay. It's just in the same condition as if it was just made yesterday. And inscribed on this stone was translated from ancient Greek to approximate what these words would look like if it was ancient Greek. Basically, these translator people took this information, and from this came a body of knowledge that was described as, it's referred to as the Emerald Tablet, but it's basically a one-page essay that has to do with all of the subject of alchemy. And many people have retranslated this from our translation, which is the modern translation, into Latin. And that Latin version has been retranslated many, many times by many people that want to make it more understandable to modern English. And it's a very unique, very encompassing subject because it covers an understanding of the creation of the Philosopher's Stone. And Ormus, you could say, is a cousin to the Philosopher's Stone. It doesn't have all the properties of the Philosopher's Stone, but it's, you could say, the fast food version of the Philosopher's Stone. The Philosopher's Stone, supposedly, according to legend, has the capability of bringing in immortality, which there's no anything that anyone's ever discovered with Ormus that can create immortality, but it can do very profound things that are beyond the scope of anything that's normal by our standards. So one of the precepts it talks about is as above, so below, and it covers many details. And essentially what it's saying is there's a reflection. What's going on above has a corresponding reflection to what's going on below. And this even has correspondences within the microcosms of even the human body, as in what's above the heart has a correspondence below the heart, right down to the chakras and everything.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, you obviously made relation to Ormus and the Philosopher's Stone. In the 2011 film Limitless, Bradley Cooper plays a role in which he has the ability to access the other 99% of his brain in which other people can't access. I heard that the pill he took could be referencing some sort of monatomic element. Could you maybe elaborate a little bit about that or talk about the connection if there is one?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing in the movie that I could recall that talked about it being a monatomic element. And they did say it was a drug. Drugs are whatever they are. However, drugs primarily, according to the theory of the movie, were supposed to have the capability of working on the brain. Ormus could be construed to be similar to that, but the idea of Ormus is not to work on the brain. Ormus works on the spirit. It kind of works out there at the telomeres of the DNA. You know, possibly parts of the DNA that scientists can't understand what they are, so they refer to it as junk DNA because they don't know what it is, because they don't understand it, they say it's junk. You know, typical science, right? But the thing about it is this. Ormus does things that, because it's a spiritual supplement, it's beyond the scope of medicine, because it's not really a medicine. It's not anything like that. It's not a drug, it's not a medicine, it's not a supplement. And when I say it's a spiritual supplement, that word supplement is in quotes, because it does things spiritually that is very unique and can't be described in similar terms to anything else. See, Ormus can't even be defined by science, because all of the methods of understanding of science use this burn it to pieces kind of a mentality in a laboratory, analyze it, and look at it, break it down under a microscope, break it down under all these tests, and then define it as Ormus. Well, when you do that to Ormus, Ormus disappears. And when it's gone, there's nothing to analyze. So our current system of the periodic table defies the possibility of defining Ormus. You know, and it was discovered by mistake in the 70s by a farmer who was doing some experimentation with chemicals to improve the ground in the desert for agricultural reasons. And he kept discovering this substance that he didn't know what it was, and brought it to all the top scientists, government scientists, and kept going round and round and round with these scientists that said, I don't know what it is, but, you know, it doesn't matter. It's no big deal. Don't worry about it. It's like, no, I want to know what this stuff is. You know, I really want to know what this stuff is. And he went from one scientist to another, and he went to top government scientists to discover what is this actual Ormus. He didn't have the name Ormus yet, but one of the things he discovered is that it was a superconductor, which means it has the capability of conductivity beyond any normal conductor, infinitely beyond any normal conductor. And in fact, it's actually quantum. So you could take a batch of Ormus, break it up, put one piece of Ormus, or one container of Ormus here, and the rest of that Ormus in Europe, on Mars, in Pluto, whatever, anywhere you want to put it. Distance is irrelevant. And you could do something that will, you know, play a musical song that will affect the molecules of the Ormus and examine that under a microscope. And then the other Ormus elsewhere in that batch will immediately, with no time delay at all, change its characteristic to match that original Ormus instantaneously with no time delay. It's completely quantum in that capacity. And I've done experiments where I give a person Ormus, and then I have a batch of Ormus, and I do sound healing on the Ormus. And then that Ormus will affect the Ormus inside that other person's body. And it's quite miraculous. It's really amazing stuff. I mean, I just love it.
Could you maybe break down for us what an ORME stands for? And like you said, when consumed, what does it do for us on a spiritual level? I know we've been challenged in terms of trying to explain to folks, because like you said, it's not something that you see on an external standpoint, but it's something that we feel internally. So could you, again, just explain what an ORME is and what it does for someone when it's consumed?
Okay. So Ormus was a word that was coined by the man that discovered Ormus, Hudson, and it was Orbitally Rearranged Monatomic Elements. And then, just to make it simpler, it got changed to ORMUS because it just seemed easier to pronounce. Later, he decided he wasn't sure whether or not it was monatomic or not. So that was part of the reason why he changed it to a U, because it was kind of hard to confirm that. Because it's kind of hard to like look at a single atom and confirm that it's a single atom. But it's a belief. I don't know of anyone that's able to prove or disprove that one way or another. But it has the ability to do many things. One of them that's very interesting is biological transmutation. That means when the substance is introduced into the body, because it's of pure spiritual essence, it's made, you could almost say, ritualistically. And alchemy is when you combine science with spirituality together, which is why it would fall under being ritualistically, because you can't do it in a laboratory setting, in a sterile environment, with no concern for the energy of the persons involved. I mean, if you had machines make Ormus robots or whatever, it probably would have little or no effect at all. The essence of the person that's procuring and gathering the Ormus has a profound effect on the Ormus. It makes a world of difference, because it's like the spirituality is channeled through the being to the Ormus.
Can you explain to us or break down in layman's term what biological transmutation means?
Yeah, biological transmutation means biologically your body takes a substance that comes in and turns it into what it needs, what it wants. So let's say you need calcium, but you don't have enough calcium and you're not eating calcium. So you got a whole bunch of iron, and it takes the iron and it changes the elements of the iron into calcium. That's an extreme example. Now, that depends on two things. One is the individual's health level and its own ability to biologically transmutate. I don't know if anyone can actually turn calcium into iron or iron into calcium. But there are certain substances that are more susceptible to biological transmutation than others. And Ormus is very capable of biological transmutation. It's ready to just, okay, here we go, transform me, take me up, because it comes from spiritual essence, which is the origins of what we're all made of, what our complete fiber start is. I mean, we start out as spiritual beings, and we get into this form of density. It becomes more and more physical. And when a person's sick, it starts out as what's called a miasm, a spiritual illness. So when you're sick, the sickness starts way out there. And it works its way in, and by the time it's in your physical form, you're extremely sick. But if you work the spiritual essence, you create a wellness in the aura, and then that aura begins to impact further and further the physical densities of the body. And then before you know it, you heal the spirit, and the spirit then heals the body. And then the body is like feeling better. I mean, it explains things why people can say prayers and people can do, take you to spiritual places, and suddenly you feel healthier. It's not drugs. It's spiritual essence that's being raised and brought about to a higher state of existence. So Ormus is very ready to be biologically mutated. It's really beautiful for that. And you were asking a question also, something about Emoto's work, right?
Well, yes, absolutely, because in listening to you and getting a little bit more enlightened about the whole process and all that entails, Dr. Emoto did some really amazing and brilliant work with water, where he took the water and did prayers for one, for I think it was like a bottle, for example,
Yes.
and he did specific prayers and played beautiful healing music. And then with the other container or bottle of water, it was the complete opposite. So he put, it was using negative words, and I don't know if there was music involved or what have you, but in short, what they showed is afterwards, when they took out the water and looked at it under a microscope, the one that did get the positive praise and healing and music looked like a beautiful snowflake, whereas the other one looked like mold. And the crazy thing about that, or what is mind-boggling, is they say if that, words and music has the power to do that to water, what about our bodies, which is comprised of 70 to 90% water? So when you talk about Ormus and the individual who's involved in making it and how that's a pivotal part of the process, it's crazy, because that was the first thing that came to my mind. So could you maybe explain a little bit about that? And again, if one were to consume the Ormus, what all is entailed, essentially?
Okay, so the thing is this. Emoto's work went on the theory that energy could affect material. And he used water because it was convenient, because he could expose water. Water's abundant, it's convenient. He could expose it to energy, and then he could freeze it and photograph the crystals. Now, that doesn't mean that energy only affects water. Energy affects all material. It's just that it's harder to grab a rock, break it down, and show the evidence of the molecular structure changing in the rock as it is to water. Now, some things change more readily than others, but all materials are subject to change due to spiritual energy affecting it, right? So naturally with Ormus, you're going to have change, and then the Ormus is going to be a catalyst to change whatever individual comes in contact with it, or whatever plant forms or other DNA that can sprout out of that and create whatever it needs to create, which has been done with many things. It's an amazing substance that's been used in agriculture to create unbelievable, experiments with plant life. So there's a lot to it.
Do you want to talk about that walnut experiment you were telling me about? And also, if you could mention that you pretty much make Ormus on a full moon, correct?
Yeah. Now, you don't have to make Ormus on a full moon, but Ormus is representative of the divine feminine. And there's the most feminine time, you could say, is during a full moon. So you have the greatest yield of Ormus. Like, you can actually get, in the process of gathering Ormus, twice as much Ormus on a full moon as you could any other time of the month. So Ormus has to do with water, has to do with the feminine. And obviously, anyone that menstruates understands that there's a correlation between the moon and the feminine energy. So, and it's a very feminine energy, Ormus, which is why also it's so healing. And so, did I answer the question?
Yes, you did.
Well, how do we get our hands on Ormus, and how do we, how is it best used? Can you use it, mix it with anything? I know you mentioned you have to keep it away from electronic items, so can you basically explain to us, first and foremost, how we can get some, and second, what are the care instructions for it?
You go to shiningoncreatives.com, and you just scroll down until you find a link for Ormus. And the thing about Ormus and electromagnetics is Ormus is like feminine, which is water, and electricity, which represents fire, which is masculine. It cancels out the effects of the Ormus because it's an opposite energy. So if you have too much fire exposed to water, it evaporates. So just like you expose Ormus to a highly electromagnetic field, it'll disappear on you. You may see whatever was the container of the Ormus, but the potential, the active part of the Ormus, will be gone. And Ormus is partially in this dimension and partially in another dimension. So because Ormus is partially in this dimension and partially in another dimension, it's able to go back and forth. So it's 4/9 here and 5/9 elsewhere, wherever elsewhere it is. And originally when experiments were done, an electromagnetic field was applied to Ormus, And Hudson thought that he had discovered with his scientists the secret to invisibility because the Ormus disappeared when he was making it.
Like literally vanished?
It was on a plate, electromagnetic field was applied, and the Ormus was gone. So what he did is he took a stick and he dragged the stick when the electromagnetic field was applied through the pile of Ormus powder. And then he turned off the switch and the Ormus came back, but it was completely undisturbed. So the same amount of Ormus was there in the exact same configuration. So because of this, it became clear that the Ormus had not become invisible. It actually had gone elsewhere and come back. So one could, there's so much to know about the Ormus. There's so much of it that is theoretical. But one could have the conjecture that you could gain abilities from other dimensions, just from the exposure of Ormus, just from being in contact with it or consuming it or whatever. And the potential is so undiscovered, it's unbelievable.
Which is why I was asking the question about, or making the correlation with limitless. Isn't it almost, kind of symbolic of that, about unlocking that potential or that part of us that we can't regularly access?
Well, yeah, because the thing is there's always talk about we only use 5% or 1% or 2% or 10% of our brain. And, there are theories about that some people find too incredible. Some people think, oh, well, okay, whatever. But there's theories about stories that are legends about ancient Egyptian aliens that came down and they wanted to have slaves, so they switched off certain DNA in humans so that they would be obedient slaves. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not, who knows, but the fact remains is, for whatever reason, there's definitely aspects of DNA that's definitely provable that have been turned off, that are starting to be turned on in people that are highly psychic. And this can be verified. Whether a person wants to believe it or not, this is easily documentable. And because DNA can be changed and transformed, you open up possibilities. And it was my vision, personally, to create something like what I saw in Limitless. Because I'm an herbalist and I love doing interesting things with herbs. But herbs are earth magic, and Ormus is celestial magic. So it's what's called a higher magic. It doesn't mean it's more powerful, but it's more divine. And the creation of the potential of this is really interesting. And what I did is I've done things like created something like, I call it a super Ormus, which was my attempt to emulate NZT. And at one point, I gave this to a friend of mine who had a really, really, really bad memory. And he would always talk to on the phone to make payments for his account for some particular loan that he had to pay back. And they'd say, well, what's your account number, sir? And he'd never remembered. He would just say, look it up. And he was on the phone. He's like, what's your account number, sir? And it's like, 6579843221, whatever the number was. And he looks at the phone and he's like, whoa, what just happened there? 3 days later, after he took the Ormus, all of a sudden he's noticed that he's suddenly able to remember something that he'd never been able to remember before. And then even a week later, somebody else asked him another question about another number, and he spouted that number right out. So, and this is only on one experience with Ormus, just one time only. So my idea was I always wanted to create this NZT, but I didn't want it to be a drug, so I didn't make a drug. And I didn't want it to be something that had a downside with negative adverse effects, like in the movie. So I didn't want anything to do with drugs, so I didn't touch anything that had anything to do with drugs. And I created something that could maximize incredible potential. So that's what we have.
Okay. I have one last questions, actually. I've taken your ORMEs before, and I felt amazing every time I've taken it. I just feel so light, as if like I'm being picked up off of Earth.
Yes.
So amazing, and it just continuously goes on for the next day and the next day. I know that it's working in my body. Now, I've taken it different times. What I wanted to ask you is, what do you personally recommend? Whether we take it at night, in the morning, on an empty stomach, or on a full stomach, or does it even matter?
Well, those are typical questions that a lot of people ask because they're used to asking questions to things that apply to drugs or vitamins or supplements, and ORMES isn't any of that. So because it's not that, I don't know of any rules that have to do with any of that. It seems to be inapplicable. However, one thing that I think is applicable is you can have a different amount of potential that you can capture from the ORMEs. For instance, if you're getting ready to go to bed in a relaxed state, that's a good time to have it. If you're getting ready to meditate, that's a good time to have it. And the ORMEs will work whether or not you have a full stomach, an empty stomach, you're getting ready to go to a kickboxing match, whatever. But a lot of times people will notice the effects. They're still going to work, but you will notice the effects if you're in a calm state, because you can tune into your awareness of your spiritual essence more. You're not going to be tuning into your spiritual awareness if you're, for instance,
At a party.
Out getting drunk. And I would not recommend getting drunk because you don't want to, because many things that are coupled with ORMEs will maximize the effects of whatever you're having because you have more spiritual essence interacting with it. So I would not say it's a good idea at all to get drunk or combine it with anything else.
Okay.
But it's, you're not going to be, if you're just breaking up, you're a gardener, chopping down trees or something like that, you're going to be focused on your trees, not on what's going on with my body and the ORMEs.
Great.
So that's basically it.
Okay. How can we find you?
Well, you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on the Shine On Creatives website. You can find me. I'm probably going to have a fan page on Facebook pretty soon because I'm getting close to the friends limit, and a lot of people want to add themselves, and I try to limit it to people that are in my local area, but I'm going to have to create a fan page soon, get that up, and that should cover it.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming down and meeting with us and sharing a little bit more about the amazing work that you do.
Yeah.
Again, you can find Divinicus on Facebook by Divinicus Alchemus.
Divinicus Magicus Alchemist.
There you go.
Alchemist Magicus.
Alchemist Magicus.
Alchemist
Yeah.
And we do have him under the People We Love section on Shine On Creatives, as well as the ORMES section under Products and Services. So definitely check him out. There's so much more to learn about him, and we look forward to having you back and learning more.
Sure.
Thank you.